I thought planning my wedding would be stressful, but nothing prepared me for what happened at my bridal shower when my future mother-in-law walked in. The morning of my bridal shower started perfectly. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, sunlight streaming through the lace curtains my mom had hung when I was 12. The same curtains that had witnessed countless sleepovers, heartbreaks, and dreams of my future wedding day. My maid of honor had planned everything down to the last detail: pale pink decorations, mimosas with fresh strawberries, and all my favorite people gathered in our family's backyard garden. I spent an hour getting ready, carefully applying makeup and slipping into the flowing sundress I'd picked out months ago. It was cream-colored with tiny embroidered flowers, something that made me feel feminine and bride-like without being too formal. My mom kept popping her head in every few minutes, her eyes misty with pride and excitement. She'd been planning this day almost as much as I had been planning my wedding. The guests started arriving around noon. My college roommates, work friends, aunts, cousins, and my grandmother who'd flown in from across the country. Everyone was chatting, laughing, and the energy was exactly what I'd hoped for. We played silly games, opened beautiful gifts, and I felt surrounded by so much love and support. My heart was full watching all the important women in my life come together to celebrate this milestone. Then she arrived. I heard the back gate creak open and turned to see my future mother-in-law walking across the lawn. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. She was wearing a floor-length white dress, not off-white, not cream, not ivory, pure bright white. It had lace sleeves, a fitted bodice, and a flowing skirt that rustled as she walked. It looked like a wedding dress because it practically was a wedding dress. The entire backyard went silent. I watched my mom's face go from confused to horrified in about 3 seconds. My grandmother actually gasped out loud. My maid of honor rushed over to me, whispering that she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger, but I was so shocked I couldn't even speak. She walked right up to me with the biggest smile, acting like nothing was unusual about her outfit choice. She gave me a hug and started gushing about how beautiful everything looked, how excited she was for the wedding, how she just knew her son had picked the perfect girl. The whole time I could feel everyone staring at us, waiting to see how I would react. I managed to mumble something about how nice it was that she could make it, but inside I was spiraling. How could someone be so tone-deaf? Everyone knows you don't wear white to someone else's wedding events. It's like the most basic rule of wedding etiquette. I kept glancing around at my guests, seeing the mixture of shock, second-hand embarrassment, and pity in their eyes. The rest of the shower was completely ruined for me. Every conversation felt awkward. Every photo was going to have her in that white dress, drawing attention away from what was supposed to be my special day. I tried to focus on the gifts and the games, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd done this on purpose. There was no way someone could accidentally show up to a bridal shower in a white dress. My mom tried to salvage the situation by keeping conversations flowing and directing people's attention elsewhere, but the damage was done. When we took group photos, I made sure to position myself so she wasn't directly next to me. I couldn't stand the thought of looking back at pictures from my bridal shower and seeing her white dress prominently featured. After she left, my mom, grandmother, and closest friends all huddled around me. They were furious on my behalf, saying they'd never seen anything so inappropriate in their lives. My grandmother, who's usually the most diplomatic person I know, actually said she wanted to march over to her house and give her a piece of her mind. That's when I knew it was really as bad as I thought. That night, I called my fiancé. I tried to explain what happened without sounding too dramatic, but I could hear the disbelief in his voice when I described her outfit. He kept asking if I was sure it was actually white, if maybe it was just a really light color that looked white in certain lighting. I had to describe the dress in detail 3 times before he finally believed me. He promised he would talk to her about it, but I could tell he was uncomfortable with the whole situation. He kept making excuses about how she probably didn't realize how it would look, how she was just excited about the wedding, how she didn't mean any harm. I appreciated that he wanted to give his mom the benefit of the doubt, but I was hurt that he wasn't more upset on my behalf. The conversation with her apparently didn't go well. According to my fiancé, she got defensive and claimed she didn't see what the big deal was. She said it was just a dress she liked and thought was appropriate for a celebration. She insisted she wasn't trying to upstage me or cause any problems. She even had the nerve to say that maybe I was being too sensitive about the whole thing. This response made me even angrier than the original incident. If it had been a genuine mistake, I could have forgiven her. Everyone makes social blunders sometimes. But her refusal to acknowledge that what she did was inappropriate, let alone apologize for it, showed me exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. It felt like a preview of what our relationship was going to be like for the rest of my life. The weeks leading up to the wedding became increasingly tense. Every interaction with her felt loaded with unspoken conflict. She continued acting like nothing had happened, being overly friendly and enthusiastic about wedding planning. But I couldn't forget what she'd done, or how she'd responded when confronted about it. I found myself second-guessing every suggestion she made, wondering if there was some hidden agenda behind her helpfulness. My fiancé was caught in the middle, trying to keep the peace between his mother and me. I could see the stress wearing on him. He loved his mom and wanted to believe the best about her intentions, but he also wanted to support me and make sure I felt comfortable. The situation was creating tension in our relationship at exactly the time when we should have been happiest and most united. I started having doubts about the wedding itself. Not about marrying him, I loved him completely, but about what I was signing up for with his family. If she was willing to be this inappropriate and boundary-crossing before we were even married, what would she be like afterward? Would she always try to insert herself into our important moments? Would she ever respect me as his wife? My friends and family rallied around me during this time. They assured me that what she did was absolutely unacceptable, and that my feelings were completely valid. My mom, who's usually very diplomatic and tries to see all sides of a situation, was uncharacteristically harsh in her judgment. She said it was one of the most selfish and attention-seeking behaviors she'd ever witnessed at a wedding-related event. Update 1. I thought things couldn't get worse after the bridal shower incident, but I was wrong. 2 weeks before the wedding, I discovered something that completely changed everything I thought I knew about the situation. I was at my future mother-in-law's house with my fiancé, going over some last-minute wedding details. She had insisted on helping with the final preparations, and despite my reservations, I was trying to keep things civil for everyone's sake. While she was in the kitchen making coffee, I noticed a photo album sitting on her coffee table that I'd never seen before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started flipping through it. Most of the pictures were family photos from years past, but toward the back I found something that made my blood run cold. There were photos from what looked like a formal event, her wearing the exact same white dress she'd worn to my bridal shower. But these photos were dated from several months before my shower, and she was standing next to a man I didn't recognize. When she came back with the coffee, I asked her about the photos as casually as I could manage. Her face went pale and she quickly closed the album, saying they were just old pictures that weren't important. But I had seen enough to know there was more to this story. That evening I couldn't stop thinking about those photos. The dress, the formal setting, the way she was positioned next to that unknown man. It all seemed too coincidental. I decided to do some investigating on my own. I started by looking through her social media accounts, which I'd never really paid attention to before. What I found shocked me to my core. Buried in her posts from 6 months earlier were photos from what was clearly her own wedding. She had remarried, something she had never mentioned to any of us. The man in the photos was her new husband, and she was wearing that white dress. The same dress she later wore to my bridal shower. I felt sick to my stomach. She hadn't just worn white to my bridal shower out of poor judgment or attention-seeking behavior. She had worn her own wedding dress. The symbolism felt deliberate and cruel. It was like she was trying to remind everyone that she was also a bride, also deserving of attention and celebration. When I confronted my fiancé with this information, he was as stunned as I was. He had no idea his mother had gotten married again. She had kept the entire relationship and wedding secret from her own son. We spent hours trying to piece together why she would hide something so significant, and then wear her wedding dress to my bridal shower. The more we talked about it, the more disturbing patterns emerged. She had always been somewhat jealous of the attention her son gave to other women in his life. She had made subtle comments about his previous girlfriends, always finding ways to criticize them or make them feel unwelcome. I had noticed some of this behavior directed toward me, but I had chalked it up to normal mother-in-law protectiveness. Now I realized it was something much deeper and more problematic. She seemed to view me as competition for her son's affection, rather than as someone who loved him and wanted to build a life with him. Wearing her own wedding dress to my bridal shower felt like a way of asserting dominance, of reminding everyone that she was the first and most important woman in his life. My fiancé was devastated by this revelation. He felt betrayed by his mother's secrecy and horrified by her behavior at my shower. He immediately called her and demanded an explanation. According to him, she broke down crying and admitted that she had been afraid to tell him about her new marriage because she was worried he would disapprove or feel replaced. But her explanation for wearing the dress to my shower was even more disturbing. She claimed she had worn it because she wanted to feel special and beautiful, like a bride again. She said seeing me so happy and excited about my wedding had made her nostalgic for her own recent wedding day. She wanted to recapture some of that joy and attention. This response made me realize just how self-centered and inappropriate her thinking was. My bridal shower was supposed to be about celebrating me and my upcoming marriage, not about her reliving her own wedding experience. The fact that she couldn't see how hurtful and boundary-crossing her behavior was showed me that this wasn't just a mistake. It was a fundamental problem with how she viewed relationships and appropriate behavior. I found myself questioning everything about our upcoming wedding. How could we have a celebration knowing that his mother had such twisted motivations? How could I trust her to behave appropriately at future family events? Most importantly, how could I be sure that my fiancé would be able to set appropriate boundaries with her going forward? The stress of this situation was affecting every aspect of my life. I was having trouble sleeping, losing my appetite, and finding it hard to focus on anything else. My friends and family were concerned about how much this was weighing on me so close to the wedding. Some of them even suggested that maybe I should postpone the wedding until these family issues were resolved. But postponing felt like letting her win. I loved my fiancé and I wanted to marry him. I didn't want to let his mother's inappropriate behavior derail our plans and our happiness. At the same time, I knew that marrying into this family meant dealing with her for the rest of my life. And I wasn't sure I was prepared for that reality. Update 2. Just when I thought I had processed the worst of the situation, something happened that turned everything upside down again. 3 days before the wedding, I received a call that changed my entire perspective on the events of the past few months. The call was from the man I had seen in the photos with my future mother-in-law, her secret husband. He introduced himself and asked if we could meet because he had something important to tell me about his wife's behavior. I was hesitant at first, but something in his voice convinced me that this was serious. We met at a coffee shop downtown, and what he told me was beyond anything I could have imagined. He explained that his wife, my future mother-in-law, had been struggling with early-onset dementia for the past year. She had been trying to hide it from everyone, including her son, because she was terrified of being seen as weak or losing her independence. He went on to explain that her behavior had become increasingly erratic and inappropriate over the past several months. She would often forget social conventions and do things that seemed deliberately hurtful, but were actually the result of her condition affecting her judgment and impulse control. The decision to wear her wedding dress to my bridal shower, he said, was likely the result of confused thinking rather than malicious intent. He had tried to convince her to tell her son about her diagnosis, but she had refused. She was desperately trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy, even as her condition was making that increasingly impossible. He had decided to reach out to me because he was worried about how the family conflicts were affecting everyone, especially with the wedding so close. I sat in that coffee shop feeling like my entire world had shifted. All the anger and hurt I had been carrying suddenly felt misplaced and unfair. Instead of dealing with a manipulative, attention-seeking mother-in-law, I was actually dealing with someone who was sick and scared and trying to hide a devastating diagnosis. When I got home, I immediately called my fiancé and asked him to come over. I told him everything I had learned, and watched as he went through the same emotional journey I had just experienced. The anger and betrayal transformed into grief and guilt. He was heartbroken that his mother was facing this alone, and that he hadn't recognized the signs of her declining condition. We spent that entire evening talking about what this meant for our relationship with her, and for our upcoming wedding. Everything we had interpreted as selfish or manipulative behavior suddenly made sense in the context of her medical condition. The secrecy about her marriage, the inappropriate dress choice, the defensive responses when confronted, all of it could be explained by someone whose judgment and impulse control were being affected by dementia. I felt overwhelmed by a mixture of emotions. Relief that her behavior hadn't been intentionally malicious. Guilt for having harbored such negative feelings toward someone who was actually struggling with a serious illness. Sadness for what she and the whole family were going through. And uncertainty about how to move forward with this new information. My fiancé was determined to confront his mother about her diagnosis and offer his support. But I worried about the timing with the wedding just days away. We decided to wait until after the honeymoon to have that conversation, giving ourselves time to process this revelation and figure out how to approach such a sensitive topic. The wedding took on a completely different meaning knowing what we now knew. Instead of feeling angry and defensive around his mother, I found myself watching her with compassion and concern. I noticed small signs that I had missed before: moments of confusion, difficulty following conversations, and an underlying anxiety that I now understood was related to her fear of her condition being discovered. During the reception, she approached me to apologize again for the bridal shower incident. This time, instead of feeling frustrated by what I had previously seen as a non-apology, I heard the genuine confusion and distress in her voice. She seemed to understand that she had done something wrong, but couldn't quite grasp what it was, or why it had been so upsetting. I found myself giving her a real hug for the first time since the bridal shower, telling her that everything was okay, and that I was glad she was there to celebrate with us. The relief in her eyes was heartbreaking. I realized that she had probably been carrying around guilt and confusion about that day for weeks, not fully understanding why everyone had been so upset with her. Our honeymoon gave us time to process everything and plan our approach for supporting her going forward. We researched dementia and its effects, spoke with medical professionals about what to expect, and discussed how to have difficult conversations with someone who was still trying to hide their diagnosis. When we returned, we had a gentle but honest conversation with both her and her husband about the family's desire to be supportive and involved in her care. It was emotional and difficult, but also brought us closer together as a family. She cried with relief at not having to pretend anymore, and my husband was able to express his love and commitment to being there for her through this challenge. Final update. 6 months after our wedding, I can honestly say that learning about my mother-in-law's condition was the most important thing that happened during our entire wedding process. It completely transformed our relationship and taught me valuable lessons about making assumptions and giving people the benefit of the doubt. She moved in with us about 3 months ago, when her condition progressed to the point where she needed more daily support. The woman I once saw as manipulative and boundary-crossing has become someone I genuinely care about and want to protect. We've developed a relationship built on patience, understanding, and compassion rather than conflict and suspicion. Taking care of her has brought my husband and me closer together in unexpected ways. We've learned to work as a team, to communicate more effectively about difficult situations, and to support each other through challenging times. The stress of caregiving is real, but it's also shown us that we can handle hard things together. There are difficult days, of course. Days when she doesn't remember who I am, when she gets agitated or confused, when the disease steals a little more of the person she used to be. But there are also beautiful moments. Times when she shares stories from her past, when she laughs at something silly on television, when she tells me she's proud to have me as a daughter-in-law. I think about that white dress often. What once seemed like the ultimate insult now feels like a sad symbol of someone trying desperately to hold on to herself as her mind slowly slipped away. She was trying to recapture feeling special and beautiful and celebrated, not understanding that doing so at my event was inappropriate. The dress hangs in her closet now, and sometimes I catch her looking at it with confusion, not quite remembering when or why she wore it. The experience taught me that our first interpretation of someone's actions isn't always the right one. People's behavior can seem inexplicable or hurtful when we don't have the full context of what they're dealing with. I'm not saying we should excuse all bad behavior, or that people with medical conditions can't still be held accountable for their actions. But I learned the value of approaching conflicts with curiosity, rather than immediately assuming the worst intentions. My relationship with my husband's family is now stronger than I ever imagined it could be. His father, who I initially saw as complicit in her behavior, has become one of my closest allies in providing care and support. We share the daily challenges and small victories that come with loving someone through cognitive decline. I also learned something important about wedding planning and the pressure we put on having perfect events. So much of my distress came from feeling like she had ruined my special day. But looking back, the love and support from my family and friends was what made that day meaningful. Not whether everyone followed proper etiquette or whether every moment went according to plan. The bridal shower that felt so ruined at the time now holds different memories for me. Yes, there was the awkwardness and confusion of her dress choice. But there was also my grandmother flying across the country to be there, my college friends taking time off work to celebrate with me, my mom's proud tears as I opened gifts. Those moments of love weren't diminished by her inappropriate outfit. I just couldn't see past my anger to appreciate them at the time. If I could go back and give advice to myself from that day, I would say to take a breath before reacting. To consider that there might be more to the story than what's immediately visible. To focus on the relationships and experiences that truly matter, rather than getting caught up in perceived slights or breaches of etiquette. Our first Christmas together as a family was particularly meaningful. She helped me make cookies using her mother's recipe, one that she was afraid she would forget. We looked through old photo albums together, and she told me stories about my husband's childhood that he had never shared. In those moments, I felt grateful for the opportunity to know her as a whole person rather than just as the woman who wore white to my bridal shower. The white dress incident will always be part of our family story, but it's no longer the defining moment I once thought it was. Instead, it became the beginning of a deeper understanding, a stronger marriage, and a more compassionate approach to the people we love. Sometimes the things that seem like disasters in the moment turn out to be exactly what we needed to learn and grow. I still keep in touch with the friends who supported me through that difficult time. They often ask how I'm doing with the caregiving responsibilities, and whether I ever regret not knowing about her condition from the beginning. Honestly, I'm glad things happened the way they did. If I had known about her dementia from the start, I might have treated her with pity rather than approaching her as an equal. Our relationship might have been defined by her illness rather than by getting to know each other as people. Now, when she has good days and her personality shines through clearly, I feel like I'm getting to know the woman my husband grew up loving. When she has difficult days, I remember that this disease is stealing her from all of us, and I try to approach those moments with the same grace I would want someone to show me if I were in her position. The white dress hangs in the closet as a reminder that every story has layers we might not immediately see. Every person we encounter is fighting battles we know nothing about. And sometimes the most important lessons come disguised as the most painful experiences. Our marriage is stronger for having weathered this challenge early on. We learned how to support each other through family difficulties, how to approach problems as a team, and how to extend grace even when we feel hurt or angry. These are skills that will serve us well throughout whatever challenges life brings us. Looking back, I realized that my bridal shower wasn't ruined by a white dress. It was complicated by a misunderstanding, transformed by new information, and ultimately made more meaningful by the lessons it taught us about love, family, and forgiveness. Sometimes the most beautiful stories emerge from the most difficult beginnings.